Hey guys, this is Dimitri and welcome back to another Haruknux review. Lian, as you know, specialize in aluminum cases, and I think three words summarize their direction: simplicity, quality, and premium. You'd never see a spaceship style case from Lian, and if you would, it would be elegant. The aluminum craftsmanship is something I've missed over my last several reviews, as really getting your hands on this full aluminum frame is very satisfying. And of course, you gotta pay the premium for Lian, as they still keep production in Taiwan and do not outsource. Now we're going to take a look at the PC-V360A. This is the silver version and it's also available in black. This is a micro ATX chassis with an unappealing price of $140, which may turn you off right away, but let's see if Lian managed to pack enough functionality into this case to justify its price. First thing, anodized black aluminum always leaves fingerprints and requires maintenance for it to look decent, but that's not the case in its natural state, as fingerprints really don't show. The chassis is quite small and certainly fits the micro ATX form factor, and is very simple with clean edges and subtle aesthetics. Like the front panel only has the logo at the bottom, power button, and an optical slot. You see the front panel is not perforated, so ventilation is available on both sides of the panel, which isn't ideal, and you'll see why later. On the right side of the case, we have two USB 3 ports and two audio jacks. This does help to keep the front panel clean, but it also will limit the orientation of your chassis. The left side panel has a dual fan mesh, unfortunately not filtered, which doesn't make sense given the high price, and missing out on such details will lose them customers. Taking a look at the back, the power supply mounts at the top. We have 4 PCI slots and ventilation area that can also house an 80mm fan. Because the chassis is quite thin, CPU towers up to only 120mm are supported, but because of the side bracket, this really is targeted towards this all-in-one water cooling systems. At the top we find a single 120mm exhaust fan, also without a dust filter but with the same mesh as the side. It will prevent against settling dust, but still would have preferred a filter instead. The front and rear frame do elevate the chassis quite a bit with rubber inserts to prevent noise or just scratching the surface. There's also a bottom dust filter which is removable, and given your graphics cards will need to breathe, this ventilation is very much needed, but it is quite small and slightly too far back. I would have much rather preferred to see a fully meshed bottom panel with large dust filter and perhaps a fan mount to intake cool air to help out with your graphics card. One of the cool things about the V360, however, are the tubeless side panels. They are nicely secured to the frame, but giving them a little tuck from below, the side panel comes off just fine. I like this mechanism, it simplifies getting inside the case and seems robust. On the inside we have two drive cages, one for mechanical drives and the bottom one for SSDs. Next is a swivel bracket. Given we have top power supply mount, this is a very good utilization of a fan mount that can house dual 120mm fans, and thus perfect for AIO water cooling systems. It can easily be removed during installation and mounts securely back over the CPU and the memory area. Turning the case around, we do have some cable management system in place with these plastic hinges to hold the cables, and you can even double them up for that beastie 24-pin cable. Now there isn't a ton of room to work with, but surely enough for a micro ATX system, plus you can tuck your cables, which is always helpful. So the power supply mounts at the top, and we also have the top exhaust fan, which will limit the size of the unit to 180mm, which is perfectly reasonable, and we have a power supply bracket that allows convenient installation from the outside. As long as the cables aren't coming out from the very top of the power supply, you won't have any clearance issues. The drives are installed using rubber grommets and screws, which is a very simple system, so you don't need to use drive caddies. Both the mechanical and SSDs are mounted through the same system, where you slide the drive in place and lower the lock bar so they don't fall out. The top hard drive cage can also mount a single SSD in case you need to remove the bottom cage, but this would definitely make it a bit more difficult with routing, as the drive is a little further back. Now I'm liking how modular the V360 is. Very easy to remove both drive cages, so just with 5 thumb screws, which allows access to the front intake fan. The fan simply slides out as well, no need for screws, and has a removable twist-on dust filter, so the entire process of getting to the fan is extremely simple. My complaint here is the lack of appropriate spacing between the fan and the front panel. I mean, sure, side ventilation cutouts will work, but perhaps a perforated front panel will be more ideal for intake. And before getting on with the assembly, two things I'd like to mention. Lian is still one of the only few companies that include the USB 3 to USB 2 adapter, which is always useful for all the motherboards. And given the frame is made entirely of aluminum, some edges weren't exactly smooth, so you really have to be careful not to get any cuts while working with the chassis, and it would be a lot nicer for Lian to take that into account moving forward. And finally, mounting our motherboard and starting out with cable management, it is slightly unconventional given we don't have an all black interior, but it does incentivize you for a little extra effort to clean things up, and to no surprise, it looks very presentable. The PCI brackets are secured by an additional piece which has to be removed prior installation of your GPU. Not a big deal, and actually might be useful for LAN events, considering getting inside the case is hassle-free. Space-wise, we have just under 12 inches of clearance until we hit the SSD cage, which is absolutely acceptable given powerful cards are getting smaller. And taking a look at the finished build, the V360 really does handle hardware without compromise. And turning the case around, some work was needed to secure those cables, but the clamps really do help. I was disappointed to not see any cable tie notches, which will allow more flexibility in terms of routing, but the panel closes just fine, and since it's not attached with screws, you really do have to make sure that no cables are popping out that would not allow the panel to close. Putting back the dual fan bracket, it really does serve an excellent purpose for extra fans or an all-in-one water cooling system, and also an excellent way to utilize the side panel properly. Just really wish there was a dust filter included. Also, I wish Lian would have made small cutouts underneath the motherboard, as there is enough room that would allow you to route your front panel audio or USB ports and make the build looking even more pro. And in conclusion, the PC-V360A is a well-designed, elegant chassis with great aluminum craftsmanship all the way from Taiwan, with various storage options and modular drive cages. Stock support for a long graphics card is always a bonus, plus the swivel radiator or fan bracket is very innovative and utilizes the space for better cooling. Cable management in the chassis is a piece of cake, but I sure missed those cable tie mounts. However, I think Lian is still quite behind on a few basic details like missing dust filters at the top or the side, restrictive front airflow despite the small ventilation cutouts, and too small ventilation at the bottom, which should have been extended. And lastly, well, the price. Given this is a micro ATX chassis, it is not very appealing regardless of the features, and the V360 really is for those craving that aluminum feel and simple design. Now, this was a very close to being a damn good case, but I still cannot overlook the fact that $140 does not get you a dust-proof enclosure. But what do you guys think of the PC-V360? Will this be your next micro ATX case or not? Leave your comments down below, and we'll see you in the next review.